on CBS.
You can't get answers in a tweet on Face the Nation. We try to separate the noise from the news. You need to be able to have an actual conversation.
This is a CBS News special, America Decides, Campaign 23. Now reporting from the nation's capital, Norah O'Donnell.
This is a CBS News special. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington, and welcome to Election Night 2023, America Decides. We are coming to you from CBS News Election Night headquarters with our powerhouse political team. Voters went to the polls across the country today, voting on issues important to Americans and also giving us some clues into what could happen in 2024. Abortion continues to be a dominant issue, so let's get right to the new information and the latest results. Polls have closed a half an hour ago in Ohio, and voters there are deciding whether to enshrine a right to abortion in the state constitution. CBS News is rating this as lean yes. Ohio voters are also deciding on marijuana legalization. That issue is currently lean yes. We should note that nearly half of the country, 23 states, 2 territories, and Washington, D.C. have already legalized the recreational use of marijuana. Turning now to Kentucky, where Democratic Governor Andy Beshear is running for re-election and a second term. Polls there closed 2 hours ago. Beshear is currently in the lead, and CBS News rates this race as lean Democrat. It'll be interesting to talk about how he was able to pull that race off, if indeed he does. Our CBS News data team has been gathering information on how Ohioans voted and what went into that decision. So let's bring in CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, so good to see you.
Hey, Nora, great to talk to you. So let me start by telling you the story behind that lean yes characterization in Ohio. You showed the numbers. Yes, off to a big lead, but it's really early, right? That's 65%. We know that most of this is mail, an absentee vote, which we figured would favor the yes side. We've been doing exit polls throughout Ohio all day. If I apply that data here, let me show you our CBS News live estimate. This is up to the minute. This is going to get tighter, right? It's still lean yes, but right now our live estimate has it at 55-45 yes. So yes, it's still a lean, but there's a lot of vote to come in, and in particular, election day vote, which we think might favor the no side. The other thing I want to add here, Nora, and this is really important for the political implications here, we're talking about turnout, I'm just going to scribble it here, that's going to hit at least 3.9, maybe even 4 million. And to give you some context, that's about the number that voted in the midterms, that voted for Senate. Well, you get an off-year election, a ballot measure that approaches a midterm electorate, that means people are motivated. It means people are motivated on both sides, and that's going to tell a 2024 story, Nora.
And Anthony, do we have any data yet from Virginia?
No, we're not going to have a lot of Virginia data right away. But what's going to happen, I think, there is I'm going to encourage everybody to have patience, because you've got all those individual level races. It might be tomorrow. It might be a couple of days before we know how each one of them breaks. But certainly, especially around Northern Virginia, that's going to be closely watched, too, for 2024, reading the tea leaves, Nora.
All right, for now, we'll stay on the subject of Ohio and bring in CBS Weekend News anchor and national correspondent Jerika Duncan. She is in Columbus, Ohio, at a watch party for those supporting this constitutional amendment. Jerika, the many opponents of this measure, supporters of it, were all focused on this, tens of millions of dollars spent. What have you learned today?
That's right. And I can tell you right now, the atmosphere in this room, people are excited and they're encouraged, Nora, because these are volunteers and activists. They say they've been all across Ohio to try and make sure that people understand what was at stake on this issue one, the amendment to enshrine a woman's right to an abortion here in the state of Ohio. I spoke to voters on both sides. I think the voters that I spoke to primarily, and it wasn't a Democratic-leaning district, also felt very hopeful that this amendment would pass. But for those who are saying, this is extreme and we need to rethink this and there should be more conversations about it, they're also hopeful, too, because they feel as though the political ads, the governor of Ohio, who for the first time actually did a political ad with his wife, on a statewide issue. They think that those ads were effective and that they helped. And as you know, we sat down with Governor Mike DeWine on Monday, and I asked him, is there any going back if this is actually an amendment, a state constitution to affirm and legalize a woman's right to an abortion? He said to me, Norah, it is difficult to overturn, but we will have to wait and see what happens. We know that at this hour, Governor Mike DeWine is at his home watching television, as he told me he would be doing tonight. And again, a lot of people here at this watch party, roughly about 300 people that are waiting to see what those results show as the polls just closed a little over a half hour ago.
Jerika Duncan, I know we will check back in with you. And of course, that ballot measure important because many people view it as an off-year testing ground for perhaps how abortion could be viewed in the next election in 2024. We're lucky to have our powerhouse political team here at the table. Robert Costa, CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent. Nancy Cordes, our Chief White House Correspondent. Ed O'Keefe, Senior White House and Political Correspondent. And Adriana Diaz, an anchor also for the CBS Weekend News. Great to have all of you. Robert, let's start first on the issue of Virginia, which many people view as a bellwether. Even though we don't have much data yet from Anthony, we have heard a lot from some of our sources in the state.
So much of our reporting tonight is about abortion rights and how it's playing across the country. We just saw that great report from Ohio, but I'm really keeping my eye on Virginia. The Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, has taken this stand that he wants to have a 15-week ban as the Republican policy moving forward in that state, and it could be a framework for Republicans nationwide in 2024 should Republicans do well. But if they don't do well tonight, especially because of the blue suburbs in Northern Virginia, Democrats will feel like, just like in 2022, in 2024, they can again put abortion rights at the forefront of their agenda.
Our own CBS campaign reporter Olivia Rinaldi reporting that Democrats are feeling cautiously optimistic about holding the Virginia State Senate tonight. That would be a blow to Governor Youngkin, right?
Oh, he has put his political career, in a sense, not on the line, but he's gambled. He's been out there out front, even though he's not running this time around. He's saying he's the face of the Virginia Republican Party, and especially on cultural issues and the abortion issue.
And Nancy Cordes, what about that? So what happens in Ohio? What happens in Virginia on abortion rights? What could that tell us about not only the mood of the voters today, but also in 2024?
Well, I just got off the phone with the Biden campaign, and they are feeling particularly encouraged by what they're seeing, not in Ohio or Virginia, but in Kentucky, where you've got the Democratic governor, Beshear, one of the few Democratic governors in a red state, looking like he may pull off a re-election bid. And the reason that the Biden folks are so happy about that is because they say that his Republican opponent did all he could to tie Biden to Beshear, to make this a Beshear-Biden ticket, if you will. And they argued that at this hour, we have it lean Democratic, it doesn't look like it worked. That bodes well for them, they believe, in 2024, especially after we've seen some of this polling, Norah, that shows that he's trailing the former president by 3 points. Trailing in battleground states. Even if Democrats are animated, you need more than that to make up for a 10-point difference in Nevada, for example, as we saw in a recent New York Times poll. They say what's more predictive of how he'll do a year from now is not these polls, but the races that we're watching unfold tonight, and they're feeling good at this early hour.
Ed O'Keefe, want to talk to you more about those governor's races. First, let's talk about Kentucky and that particular race, because also you have a Democratic governor in Kentucky, and while he never mentioned Joe Biden's name, he did run on Joe Biden's policies. In fact, took credit for and tried to explain some of the infrastructure projects that actually benefited the people of Kentucky.
Not only that, but promoted and stood by his record fighting the pandemic. Economic growth, those three things right there, the pandemic, infrastructure, and the economy, are things President Biden would like to run on next year. But the Beshear brand in Kentucky is so strong, of course, because his father once served as governor as well. They have a good reputation there for moderate Democratic politics, and it looks, at least at this hour, that he could pull it off.
I'm curious about Daniel Cameron, because it's my understanding, did Donald Trump never go and campaign for him?
He held a town hall with him last night, but they never appeared together in the state in the closing days, which many thought might help. That's a sign, perhaps, that the Trump operation understood he couldn't pull it off.
And how did the issue of abortion play in that particular
in a really interesting way, because you have a governor who is personally opposed to abortion but understands.
A Democratic governor.
A Democratic governor,
right.
Personally opposed to it, who understands, though, that you've got to have these exceptions for rape, incest, life of the mother, ran an ad with a young woman who had been raped by her stepfather when she was 12, looked directly to camera and said to Daniel Cameron, do you really want someone like me to have to carry a baby to term? That put Daniel Cameron back on his heels, forced him to tweak his position, and they would argue, Democrats would, that that's exactly the way you can run against Republicans in states like that on that issue.
Adriana Diaz is also with us, and you, of course, have been doing a lot of reporting across the country on the issue on women's health and also abortion rights. How do you see and what are you looking at tonight?
Well, since Dobbs, Norah, what we've seen is a near total ban in 15 states. But from our reporting on the ground in places like Idaho and places like Indiana that have these near total bans, there's a lot of confusion, but not only among patients who are trying to figure out what is legal and what is not because of all of the legal challenges that have suspended some of these bans temporarily, but also among their doctors. A lot of doctors are reporting that they are worried about facing health legal challenges, that they're worried about going to jail, and that they can't do their jobs as well. And so that's really affecting maternal health. Doctors are leaving states where there's a lot of abortion restrictions, and they are also finding that there's been an increase in infant mortality from 2021 to 2022. Too soon to know if that's because of Dobbs, but doctors are certainly reporting that they feel they can't do their job as well.
Yeah, this is such an interesting issue because it kind of has gone beyond the issue about how you feel about abortion rights, because it has now affected so many things with women's health, women who have a miscarriage, doctors and other health care providers. It has kind of, doctors don't want to go into the OBGYN residency programs. It has had so many unintended consequences, say some, that has really led to some of this backlash that may be affecting what we see tonight in Ohio.
Absolutely, and it's really expanding beyond, the narrow definition that some states have, which allows abortions in some cases to save a woman's life. States like Ohio are considering, should we add health to that, protecting women's health? And then what does health mean? Ohio's governor says that's too broad. A woman's health could be her mental health. What could count there? So we're really seeing every state try to navigate this.
Mm-hmm.
In Mississippi, the other governor's race that we're watching tonight, Brandon Presley, the second cousin of the famed musician, is also one of those personally opposed to abortion, but has said, I'm pro-life from birth all the way to death, and he has spun that to suggest that's why this state needs to expand its Medicaid options. It's one of the few left that haven't. Of all the issues, that one has become a big one there and is another sign of those states that don't have that Medicaid expansion for hospitals, for maternal health, for all those other issues. Here now is another way to talk about the broader issue of maternal health and healthcare overall.
You're also hearing both sides sort of test out some new messaging on this issue. Republicans know they have some work to do. So, for example, in Virginia, the governor, Governor Youngkin, talks a lot about his proposal, a 15-week limit. He doesn't use the word ban because ban, they realize, has bad connotations. People don't want to be banned from doing things they were allowed to do before. So he calls it a limit. He gets very angry if people call it a ban. On the Democratic side, they've started talking less about abortion rights, more about reproductive freedom. Freedom is a word you're used to hearing more of on the right. But they say, no, these are freedoms that we've had, and they believe that that is a winning slogan for them. So we're going to see tonight whether these new catchphrases work from both sides.
Well, on that very note, because Virginia's Governor Glenn Youngkin really tried to flip the script, as you say, on that issue of abortion, and he recently just sat down with our campaign reporter, Olivia Rinaldi. Let's take a listen.
I had pulled together leadership and said, I think we should progress a bill that protects life at 15 weeks, where a baby can feel pain, with full exceptions in the case of rape and incest and when the mother's life is at risk. And this is a place that I think Virginians can come together on one of the most difficult topics in the Commonwealth and around the country. I just think it's really important that Virginians have a clear choice. No limits or reasonable limits. That's the bill that I will sign. That's the one that our Speaker of the House is committed to make sure comes to my desk. And I think Virginians can count on that.
Robert Costa, Virginia is the only southern state that has not passed limits on abortion rights. It does not, if the Democrats can maintain control of the Senate, Governor Youngkin will not have the ability to pass a 15-week limit, correct?
That's right. He will have a very complicated future on that policy. And terrific reporting by our colleague, Olivia Rinaldi. She was on the campaign bus there with Governor Youngkin. She also covered recently what was being called the Red Vest Retreat. You saw the governor there wearing his red vest. Yeah. It harkens back to his 2021 gubernatorial campaign. He wore a red vest. It became kind of a thing inside the GOP. Everyone started to seem to wear a vest on the campaign trail.
This is the dad
I know.
vibe.
We got vests here for America Decides. This is not a Youngkin look. This is a CBS look. But so she went down there because all these billionaires want Youngkin to get in the race. And I think sometimes these off-year elections, let's be
Into
real.
the presidential race, yes.
Into the presidential. I mean, these off-year elections, I've covered them for years. They can sometimes seem boring. They're off year. Who cares? These really matter, especially for this crossroads for the Republican Party. This isn't happening tonight in a vacuum. People are trying to still get Governor Youngkin to run for president, even though most ballot deadlines are in December. And then what's playing out on Capitol Hill? All this talk about abortion policy is happening as there's a new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who's deeply conservative, wants to move the party to the right on abortion. And it comes as former President Donald Trump has been in the courtroom. The only reason I didn't join Olivia Rinaldi at that red vest retreat is because I was watching Trump in court. That's where the Republican Party is right now, and they're closely watching what do they do at this moment. And the Democrats, too. I was just up in New Hampshire covering this Minnesota Democratic Congressman, Dean Phillips. Look, he's not a threat to President Biden in any significant way, but he's out there running against President Biden now, and there's talk in the Democratic Party. Is he in the best possible position if you look at our latest poll and the poll of others?
But do you think if the Democrats maintain control of the Senate in Virginia, what does that say about Governor Youngkin's political prowess?
Well, he may run in 28, but he's not going to. Youngkin's allies are telling me behind the scenes his path into the 2024 race, if there ever is one, is going to be he gets a bounce by winning the Senate in Virginia, winning the House of Delegates. That's kind of the push he would need. If he doesn't get that tonight, there's a 0% chance he runs it. In fact, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu was here at CBS today talking for America Decides, and he said the door's already closed for someone like Youngkin. He loves Glenn Youngkin, he said, but he said the Republican Party has to deal with the field it has.
Mm-hmm. He's 56 years old?
Mm-hmm. Plenty of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you've got a front runner who's got 65% of the vote at this point, as Donald Trump does, hard to see how even a popular Republican governor can eat away at that in time.
All right. When we come back, abortion restrictions played a big role in the midterm elections. We'll take a look at the new polling on the issue, and we've also got fresh results coming in right after the break.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
Why? Why?
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. That's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
We want to check back in with CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvantos. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Nora. Latest from Ohio, still lead for the yes side. Our live estimate there puts it a little bit tighter. We're still at 55-45, so still a lot of early vote. But what I want to show you when we talk about the issue of abortion is take a look at the exit polls as we talk to voters all day coming out of the polling places. This gives you some indication of how people felt. You had a minority of people who, when asked how do they feel about the overturn of Roe v. Wade, say that they were enthusiastic or even satisfied with that. But you had a majority, you had 21% dissatisfied and almost 4 in 10 outright angry about it. And one of the things that's interesting about this is when you go out from Ohio and look at our overall CBS national polling on this, you find a lot of people who are concerned about the policy implications of what this might mean. People who felt, overwhelming majorities who feel that pregnant women may be more at risk if more abortion restrictions are put into place, and a majority, and especially among women, worried about, and Adriana was just talking about this, maternity care centers or hospitals closing. So when you talk about what we're seeing in Ohio, you want to say for the national audience, this is something that's echoing throughout the country, how important this is and what the policy implications are, Nora.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you. So remind me now, does Ohio make the 6th or the 7th state that has had the 7th state? Explain why that's important.
That's important because over the past year, after Roe v. Wade was overturned, a number of states, not just blue states, but red states as well, had ballot initiatives that went to the voters. It wasn't the legislature deciding, but this was actually a decision being made by the voters. And in every single state, no matter whether the ballot measure was to restrict abortion access or to cement the right to abortion access, abortion rights activists won all 6. And they won in red states like Kansas, like Kentucky. You know, like many would argue, Ohio is a red state. And so what this shows is that this is an issue that has staying power as an animating force for Democrats, the way it used to be an animating force for Republicans before Roe v. Wade was overturned.
And so how does that play then, do you think, in a presidential election in 2024? I mean, it depends obviously how the candidates message it, but how do you think it plays then?
Well, Democrats hope that it will make up for the fact that President Biden himself has pretty low approval ratings right now, and that even Democrats are concerned. They have big concerns about his age, for example, and there are concerns about whether people would be enthusiastic enough about him to go to the polls. The hope is that abortion rights is such an animating force for the base that will make up for any lack of enthusiasm that might be there a year from now for the candidate himself.
Remember, you've got a president and a vice president who say they'd like to codify the right to abortion in federal law. You're going to have a bunch of congressional candidates up and down the ballot for Democrats across the country who, if you see something like that tonight in Ohio, think, okay, maybe I can run on this in swing districts across the country. Maybe even Sherrod Brown, who's going to face a tough race next year, could bring it up as well.
And if you remember the midterms, abortion was a huge driver for turnout for Democrats. I was in Wisconsin. That was something that was top of mind for most Democrats I spoke to. So Democrats are hoping that remains the case next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what has Donald Trump said if he eventually becomes the Republican nominee, as the leading Republican right now? What has he said on the issue of abortion recently that the Democrats will draw a contrast with?
Former President Trump's an intriguing political figure here because on one side of the question, he is the person who, as president, nominated justices to the Supreme Court who overturned Roe v. Wade. But he's also someone who politically has not always embraced restricting abortion rights as something he wants to put at the front of his campaign. He got criticized by his own former vice president, Mike Pence, and others in 2022 for not really hammering the issue again and again. And because of that positioning, he has some concern among evangelical voters and conservative voters that if he's the nominee, he's not going to make this a key part of his campaign. But at the same time, there's not a real unraveling with those same voters because they say, hey, even if we don't like Trump that much, we don't like that he puts this on the shelf a bit politically, he still gave us everything we wanted on abortion policy.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to some of the results that are just coming in and show those boards for people who want to know exactly what the vote is in those states. In Ohio, we mentioned, of course, two particular ballot initiatives, one on the issue of abortion, one on the issue of marijuana. And our early results are that they currently lean yes on an effort to enshrine the right to abortion in the Ohio Constitution. They are not all the results yet, but leaning in that. And that's what some of the public polling has shown is exactly that. And then on the issue of legalizing marijuana, also lean yes at this moment.
And you know, it's important to note that in the case of that Ohio measure, the stakes were really high. That's part of the reason that you saw, it looks like, a pretty high turnout, as Anthony was saying, for an off year. The state currently allows abortions up to about 22 weeks. But the Republican governor, Governor DeWine, signed a law in 2019 that would cut that down to just 6 weeks. That law is trapped in the courts right now, but there's a very real possibility that it could be enacted at some point in the near future. That's why we had this whole fight that started this summer. Don't forget, when Republicans could see the writing on the wall and they tried to pass a different ballot measure that would have said you need a 60% threshold to change the Constitution, not a 50% threshold, because they could see that it was going to end up somewhere in the high 50s. That was defeated, and now this measure appears to be on the verge of passing.
Adriana, because you have covered so much of this, how has the maternal health landscape changed in many of these states?
It's really changing all across the country. You have large areas in the South, especially, where their access to abortion is extremely limited. And then in states where there's more access to abortion, they're seeing an influx of patients coming in. So then,
including Florida.
Yes.
Governor DeSantis' state, which some people have said has become an abortion tourism state.
And so what's happening is then residents of those states are having longer wait times. We saw this in Illinois when Dobbs fell. I mean, almost all of the surrounding areas is red. And so people just really started to come into Illinois. But we're also seeing on the other side, people who are against abortion, they're also still saying that they're willing to take the trade-off, especially when it comes to OBs leaving states and maternal health declining in their states. Our CBS News poll found that 65% of women who oppose abortion say they would still, though, prefer to live in a state where there are fewer women's health services, but abortion is still mostly restricted. So they're saying, we understand OBs are leaving states where abortion is severely restricted. In Idaho, where we were reporting a few weeks ago, we found that...
That seems hard to believe because for many women, your OBGYN is your primary care physician.
It is, but this is what the polling is showing, which is surprising. And it's not just a few OBs. In Idaho, there have only 2 or 3 high-risk OBs left in the entire state by the end of the year, because so many have left because they feel they can't serve their patients. Their patients are having complications, and they feel they're limited in what they can do.
I mean, today we had the shocking numbers from the CDC that syphilis in children was going up because essentially their mothers weren't being treated for syphilis. That's why they were getting it. What does that say about women's health care treatment?
Yeah, and I think that if you look at the numbers in our polls, they're really startling. I mean, Anthony talked about them, but maybe we can put them back up. Nearly 3 in 4 Americans polled, 3 in 4 say they're worried that women are more at risk now when they're pregnant. We're not talking about women who are seeking an abortion being more at risk. And there's a big concern about that, too. We're just talking about someone who's pregnant and wants to have a baby. If they don't have access to the OB, if they don't have access to a medical facility that is shut down, you know, if they're driving longer distances to be seen or to have a baby, that's scary.
Right. According to the American Medical Association, I interviewed their head, the number of residents going into OBGYN is down 10% nationally. It's down 20% in the 26 states where abortion has been restricted. So the numbers are quite pronounced indeed. 6 states had abortion on the ballot in last year's midterms. In all 6, Americans voted to protect the right to abortion and against new restrictions. Next year, Maryland and New York are set to decide on a state constitutional right to abortion, and others may also take up this issue. Joining us now is Democratic strategist Joel Payne and Republican strategist Terry Sullivan. Both are CBS News political contributors. Great to see both of you. And Joel, let me ask you first. So how much do you think tonight's results when it comes to abortion will dictate how much Democrats want to campaign on this issue in 2024?
Norah, it's good to be with you. The one stat out of our CBS exit poll that jumps out to me out of Ohio is that 39% angry number. And I just want to say what angry means to me. Angry knocks on doors, angry raises money, angry waits hours in the rain and in the snow in line. And I can tell you that's how I'm receiving it. And I imagine that's how the folks in Wilmington with Team Biden are receiving it. I think this is welcome news, given the fact that they are counting on an issue like abortion to cut through and allow them to overcome a pretty difficult national political environment for them right now.
And Terry, how do you see this? And certainly what's happening in Ohio, how does that affect Republicans in next year's elections?
Yeah, look, I think that Joel's spot on, that the folks in Biden headquarters are very happy with this because they can't talk about the economy, they can't talk about parental rights, they can't talk about crime. So this is the one issue that they can hang their hat on and try to persuade. I think Joel's right very much on the energy factor, but I also think that this is a tough issue for Republicans amongst swing voters. And that's really the issue where Biden has real problems, as we've seen in the CBS polling, and his favorables are at lower than Trump's were at this point in time. And I think that Democrats are really trying to hang their hat on this issue, and they need to be a little bit careful that they don't get too far over their skis on it.
Well, Joel, I think we'll be able to, and even though many of the results are not in this early in the night, I know there's a race in Virginia that you're looking at as a bellwether that we can look to on messaging. Tell us about that.
Yeah, out in Loudoun County, it's the Russet Perry, Juan Pablo Segura race. And, Terry and I were talking about this before, as folks who kind of live in, at least myself, live in the greater D.C. area, you'll see a lot of these ads in between, a sporting event, and it's Republicans running on crime and it's Democrats running on abortion, which is interesting because Glenn Youngkin has very much made abortion a front and center issue with his brand, but it seems like that message did not drip down to Republicans who are actually on the ballot. And I wonder, I know it's still early and we're waiting to see what's going to happen in Virginia. I wonder how that plays out. And I think that suggests Republicans still being very anxious about leaning into that issue of abortion in a place like Virginia.
All right, stay with us. Coming up, we'll take a look at the latest election results and talk with Ohio's Secretary of State.
Our story's just begun.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high?
Where are these coming from?
That's the $1 million question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking what's happening in the world, why is this happening, and how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, and fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to our CBS News election night headquarters. It is just after 8:30 in the East with several key races still up in the air. Let's take a look at the latest results with the votes still coming in. CBS News projects that Democrat Sherelle Parker wins the race for mayor of Philadelphia, and she will become the first female mayor of Philadelphia. And in Rhode Island, the special election for 1st Congressional District, CBS News projects that Gabriel Amo has won that race, and he'll be the state's first elected Black representative to Congress. Two significant contests. And let's check back in Ohio, because the big ballot measure there is a constitutional right to abortion. And at this hour, CBS characterizes this as lean yes. Joining us now is Frank LaRose, Ohio's Secretary of State. Good evening, Mr. Secretary.
Hey, good evening, Nora.
How do you see the numbers at this hour?
Well, listen, we're in the business of reporting the results here. I'm joining you from our Election Night Reporting Center. We have less than 1 million that have been tabulated and reported at this point. That's mostly the early votes and the absentee votes. We're still receiving those votes from the Election Day polling locations. And so we'll be reporting these over the next several hours and making sure that we accurately report what decision Ohioans have made.
And so what percentage of votes are still outstanding?
Oh, gosh, well over 90% at this point. We've seen, like I said, those early and absentee votes have come in. I think the number behind me says that really just a few percent of our Election Day results have been tabulated at this point. So we're just 1 hour after polls close in Ohio. So long way to go still.
Mr. Secretary, I do have to ask you, because 6 states have had abortion on the ballot in the midterms. In all of those, Americans voted to protect abortion rights against these new restrictions. What makes you think that Ohio will vote differently?
Well, the question on the ballot today in Ohio is not simply a question of abortion rights. If this passes, it'll be the most extreme abortion law, perhaps anywhere in the country, allowing abortion all the way up through the end of pregnancy, taking away the rights of parents to have a say in the decisions that their children make. We've been making the case that it's just too extreme for a state like Ohio, and I hope and pray that the voters will see it that way as well.
Mm-hmm. And do you believe that healthcare providers who provide an abortion in Ohio should face penalties and perhaps criminal prosecution?
Well, that's not a part of what we're talking about here today. The question that's on the ballot says that can a healthcare provider, in this case the abortionist, make the decision of what's in the health interest of that patient? And again, that's a decision that a patient should make with her provider. But, again, the question of criminal penalties is not really on the table here.
But in the 6-week ban, it is part of. There are criminal penalties for a healthcare provider who does provide an abortion.
Well, sure. If you violate the law, there are penalties for that. That's why we have laws. Laws that aren't enforced are just suggestions.
Mm-hmm. So if this constitutional amendment passes tonight, will Ohio Republicans pass a law to prevent abortions after what's called fetal viability, which is around the 23rd or 24th week?
Well, this is the problem with legislating via constitutional amendment. The Constitution is obviously the supreme law of the state. And if this constitutional amendment were to pass tonight, it would supersede whatever the legislature would do. That's what is so problematic about this. But again, that's yet to be foreseen.
So what do you expect your Republican Party to do if it does pass?
Well, I can tell you that as somebody who cares about protecting life, that we want to do what we can to protect life in Ohio. But again, once a constitutional amendment's in place, it's very difficult for the legislature to do anything about that.
All right, Secretary of State Frank LaRose, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck tonight. I know it's a busy night, certainly for everyone that works in your office and counting these ballots.
Thanks, Norah.
Joining us now is Dr. Catherine Romanos. She is a family doctor in Columbus, Ohio, and a supporter of Issue 1. Doctor, good to have you. Any response to anything that the Secretary of State just said?
I think there are a lot of things that Secretary of State Frank LaRose just said that continue to propagate misinformation about this bill. This bill is about returning healthcare authority and autonomy to a patient and their provider. As an abortion provider in Ohio, I provide safe, evidence-based care, and I hope that tonight I will be informed that I'll be able to do so going forward.
And how have current restrictions limited the ability of doctors to provide care to women in the state of Ohio?
You know, currently we operate under a litany of laws that really make it a lot harder to access abortion in Ohio, and in many cases make it even less safe for a patient to access abortion in Ohio. We have waiting periods, we have mandatory information that we have to give to patients, we have ambulatory surgical facility requirements and transfer requirements, all things that the legislature has put in place to try and create more barriers in access to care. What we want tonight is to be able to take down those barriers and just talk to our patients and give them the care that they need.
What will this mean if this constitutional amendment passes?
You know, as a provider in Ohio, I've gotten very used to not providing the best care possible. I know a patient doesn't need to wait 24 hours to make an important decision when they're ready to make that decision. And I've, for a long time, had to follow the law and provide care that I think is substandard. Last year, after Dobbs, I was even forced to abandon my patients and turn them away. Even though I am technically and physically capable of providing care, I did tell them I wasn't allowed to take care of them. I'm hopeful if Issue 1 passes, I will never again have to look a patient in the eye and tell them that I'm not allowed to provide them the health care that they need.
Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, so for example, there was about 90 days after the Dobbs decision last year when our 6-week ban went into effect. And it was arbitrary. A patient would come for their first visit on a Monday, and by Tuesday we would detect cardiac activity, and I would have to tell them we could no longer take care of them, that they would have to leave the state or continue the pregnancy that they weren't ready to continue. And it was demoralizing to know that I had spent my entire career training to be able to take care of people, and I wasn't allowed to. And turning those people away was heartbreaking.
Did you have a question? Doctor, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it. When we come back, we'll talk to, thank you. When we come back, we'll talk to reporters on the ground in some of the states with big elections today and find out what's on voters' minds.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's attacking? Here's a deeper understanding of what's happening.
Prime Time with John Dickerson. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
What does that mean?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened? Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
We take you places, teach you new things, and we make you feel like, it's not all bad. We're going to uplift you.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. I mean, you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
When weather turns extreme.
A massive storm with winds of 150 miles per hour.
The storm strengthened again overnight.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real, you'll have time to get prepared. Feel the forecast. Weather when it matters most on CBS News.
I wake up every morning asking what's happening in the world, why is this happening, and how do we answer that question? After the tragic loss of beloved newsman Tim Russert, his son went on a worldwide journey to find himself.
I struggled with his grief for a long time.
How Luke Russert is honoring the legacy of his father when we go person to person. Breaking news, let's take a look at where the Kentucky governor's race stands. CBS News has just changed its rating to likely Democrat, as there is now 75% of the vote in. Let's bring in our political campaign reporter, Torian Small. He is in Louisville, Kentucky. Hey there, Torian.
Hey, Nora. My sources here tell me that things are looking good for the Democratic incumbent governor, Andy Beshear. A source familiar with the campaign says that he's on track to do better in counties that he didn't win in 2019, to either run even or to flip them. One thing that he says could be, or my source says could be telling in this race, is how he does in Hardin County. Right now, he's doing much better. In fact, he's outperforming the hometown, his opponent, Attorney General Daniel Cameron there, his hometown. So outperforming him there could bode well for this campaign, is what my source is telling me.
Really interesting, Torian. Thank you. I just want to quickly bring in Anthony Salvantu, who also can drill down on what's happening in Kentucky. Anthony?
Yep, sure can. Couple of stories here. One is Beshear doing pretty well in the upper part of the state. These are actually like the suburbs of Cincinnati up here. Democrats don't typically do well here. Donald Trump did very well here, but Beshear did. The other part is, as you get to the western part of the state, you see this blue area here. You know, Beshear got a lot of credit in the state for how he handled natural disasters. That may be playing out here. And then in and around Frankfurt and Lexington, all this blue in here, that's much better than a Democrat typically does. But he's even outperforming in some of those counties himself from 2019. So that's an improvement, and that's why we can right now rate it likely, and he seems to be on his way, Nora.
All right, Anthony, we'll leave that board up because I know that Ed, who's been following these governor races so closely, also has some insight on what's happening in Kentucky.
Well, first of all, he's just a wildly popular governor compared to most across the country, and especially for a Democrat. Part of why he's doing well in those Cincinnati suburbs might be the fact that one of the biggest economic and infrastructure projects in the state is going to be rebuilding that bridge that runs between Kentucky and Cincinnati. Mitch McConnell, the president, Beshear were all there together to announce that there were billions of dollars coming to finally fix a big problem there. Keep in mind, even though Daniel Cameron loses tonight, it looks like, or maybe on the verge of losing, he's only 37 years old, someone who's known Mitch McConnell since he was a teenager. He was a McConnell scholar at the University of Louisville, and every Republican you talk to says, win or lose, he's got a future. So whether it's running for a McConnell Senate seat one day, whether it's running again for governor one day, whether it's something in a Trump cabinet, if there were a Trump cabinet to be had in about a year and a half, this is someone they believe may have a future. Beshear himself, only 45, some say, look, he may have shown Democrats how to do it in states like Kentucky, or maybe he's a vice presidential candidate one day.
Does he have national ambitions, Beshear?
He hasn't ruled it out in several interviews in recent weeks. There are some who say he should challenge the new Kentucky law that says if the senator resigns or has to be replaced, that it has to be from the same party and just appoint himself. There are others who say he may wait till 2028 and throw his hat into the ring as a more moderate Democrat from a more rural state. We'll see. But he hasn't ruled out something in his future after 4 more years as governor.
Got it. One of the other states we're watching closely tonight is Virginia, where the legislative races are considered a bellwether for 2024. Let's go to WTVR reporter Jake Burns. He's in Henrico County, Virginia. Hey there, Jake.
Hey, good evening, Nora. Yeah, we're here in Henrico County where 2 Republican candidates are hosting the watch party behind me. We chose this location because it is very interesting. New legislative maps in Virginia for this race. Those maps in these areas favor the Democrats. If the Republicans have a good night here, that could signal good things for Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin. In Virginia, the governor can only serve 1 4-year term. He's halfway through it. So his party needs to win control of the House of Delegates and the state Senate in order for him to really enact his full agenda. Of course, the governor is closely tied to races like this in these swing districts. And really, as we mentioned, his governorship and the fate of it is tied to these districts as well. Of course, Democrats will tell you they see Youngkin as a very polished performer, but someone that will roll back various things like voting rights, clean energy restrictions, gun rules, and also abortion, importantly. Youngkin and Republicans have proposed a 15-week abortion ban that does include exceptions in that. However, Democrats say that is going to be a step back. Virginia, remember, one of the only states, the only state in the South that has not enacted new changes to the abortion laws since the Dobbs ruling. We're expecting tight races. In these races here in Henrico County, as things stand right now, there's definitely looking good for the Democrats, but we have a lot of votes still out there. Virginia always does close elections. 2017, the House of Delegates and the control of it came down to drawing a name out of an ornate bowl. So we'll have to see how this night goes here in Virginia, but some interesting turns for sure.
All right, WTVR reporter Jake Burns, thank you very much. So we do have some information that is coming in on some of these key races in Virginia, right?
Just to build on Jake's great reporting, everyone's paying attention to what's happening in these Virginia Senate races, and the races have not been called yet. But according to the official tallies that are coming in, the votes are being counted. District 31 in Virginia is something I've been watching all night. Republican Juan Pablo Segura versus Democrat Russet Perry. Right now, at 8:53 Eastern. 86% of the vote is in, and the Democrat, Perry, is ahead 51-49. Doesn't mean the Democrat's going to win, but with 86% in, it's a lot like what's happening in Kentucky. These are tight races. You look at the 16th district in Virginia for state Senate. The Democrat, Van Valkenburg, is beating the Republican 53-47 with 91% of the vote in at 8:53. So those were seats Democrats had put a lot of emphasis on, and for now, they're ahead by a bit.
And let's drill down on that one particular race with Perry versus Juan Seguro. What were the big issues there and how the two different types of candidates and what played out there?
I covered Mr. Segura a little bit, and he's a red vest wearer. He might as well be Glenn Youngkin running for state Senate. So District 31 is something that really is a referendum on Youngkin's gubernatorial tenure and Youngkin's focus on cultural issues. Remember, in 2021, when Youngkin wins, he focuses on education, Loudoun County, all the fights over the school boards. Now it's abortion at the front, and these are tighter races for Republicans.
How do you see those races?
Well, I think, what's really important here is that if Democrats can only hold on to one house of the state legislature, if they can hold on to the Senate, then that blocks Youngkin from being able to do a lot of what he has said he wants to do, sitting there on that bus, talking about abortion, talking about education. He will not have the ability to enact big swaths of his agenda if Democrats hold on to the state Senate.
All right, stand by. Mississippi Republican Governor Tate Reeves is in a closer than expected race for re-election. WJTV reporter Richard Lake is at a watch party for the governor in Jackson, Mississippi. Richard, what's the mood there?
Yeah, good evening, Nora. The mood here, I've spoken to Republican Governor Tate Reeves twice today, and he's very confident about what he is expecting tonight. He's facing Democratic challenger Brandon Presley, and he's made this a very competitive race, mainly because how much money he's raised. He's brought in over $11 million this election cycle. That's $5 million more than the incumbent governor has. So he's hoping to pull off the upset here in the Republican stronghold that is Mississippi. And now for Tate Reeves, for him to avoid that upset, he's going to need high voter turnout. He's been talking to voters across the state about another term, what it would bring. He says it brings better education, better economy, and lower taxes. And one other thing we're keeping an eye on down here is that we've heard many reports from precincts in Hinds County. That's the county that the capital city of Jackson resides in. Many of those precincts have run out of ballots. A Hinds County Chancery Court judge has filed an emergency order to extend voting hours to 8 p.m. Central Time. We're coming up right on that deadline, so it's set to be a very, very late night here in Mississippi.
Richard Lake, thank you so much. It's almost 9 o'clock in the East, and votes are still being counted in much of the country, so we'll bring you the latest results coming up.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides, taking you inside American democracy.
The most important stories on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis.
You're going to hear a lot of reporting.
It is clearly a pivotal moment.
Gun control, the economy, education.
Both sides of the political aisle fight it out for power.
Bringing you the analysis that you need.
Thoughtfully, with context.
Be part of the conversation.
On CBS News streaming.
Welcome to America Decides, Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
This is CBS.
original documentary from CBS Reports.
He started out as a fun-loving party boy, but the alcohol got the better of him. What I envisioned was him being in some sort of medical facility. I just thought, what a great candidate for them to learn about the results of alcoholism and what it does to a body. But his body was sold to the military, specifically used as a crash test dummy in a simulated Humvee explosion. I was devastated. I had the box. I don't know if they were his ashes or not. I just held it as tight as I could, and I just told him how sorry I was.
Body Brokers, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather turns extreme.
The threat of severe storms and dangerous tornadoes is expected to last
the 7th straight day of terrifying weather.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology. So advanced, so real.
Now 6 feet of water, imagine that. Cars that can act like battering rams.
These hyper-realistic simulations show you what the weather will look and feel like before it happens.
Feel the forecast. Streaming on CBS News.
She's the most successful alpine skier, male or female, ever, and a worldwide inspiration.
We need a lot of women doing sports really, really well.
The story of Michaela Schifrin's game-changing reign at the top of the slopes when we go person to person. Welcome back to our CBS News election night coverage. There is breaking news at this hour at 9 o'clock. CBS News is now projecting that Democratic Governor Andy Beshear will be reelected for a second term. Anthony Salvanto has more insight on how Governor Beshear won. Anthony?
Hey there, Nora. So the call came, the projection came when we got the votes out of Louisville. Now, it's a Democratic area. He had to do well there. He did. But when you look at this map, you see all the blue and tell a story in 3 parts. The first one is up here in these suburbs, or really sort of suburbs of Cincinnati. Democrats don't typically do well up there, but Beshear did. The second part of this is over here towards the western part of the state as we get out past Louisville toward Bowling Green. Again, another area Democrats don't typically do well, but a lot of people gave Beshear credit for how he's handled natural disasters. That may have been in play there. And then the other part around here, Frankfort and Lexington, these are all blue. If I showed you by comparison, let's say the Donald Trump win in 2020, you get a lot of red. So when people ask the political question, can a Democrat win in a red state? This is the pattern for how you do it. And, you know, people may try to follow his lead because that's a lot of blue changed over from red, Nora.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you. Ed, I know you've been covering these races closely. How did he do it?
I got to wonder how soon the White House calls him tomorrow and says, so how'd you do it? Because if you're flipping that many red counties blue, there are lessons to be learned not only at the national level for the president, but maybe for Senate candidates like John Tester in Montana or Sherrod Brown in neighboring Ohio. House candidates across the country are going to want to know what he did. What he did is he ran on his record. Economic improvement, infrastructure spending coming into the state, handled the pandemic well enough in a way that Kentuckians said, you know what, I'm willing to give him another 4 years. And the attacks from Daniel Cameron, especially in the closing weeks, that Andy Beshear as a Joe Biden Democrat didn't stick. Probably didn't stick because the Beshear name in Kentucky is so strong. His father had been governor, and he himself has developed a reputation separate and apart from the president, even though sometimes they've had to tour disaster areas together. And that should be a signal, a warning sign to Republicans as well, that with certain Democrats, at least the popular ones or the moderate ones, that kind of an attack may not work.
I want to bring in our Democratic strategist, Joel Payne, and Republican strategist, Terry Sullivan, on this. And what does this victory by Governor Beshear mean?
Well, I think Ed makes a very good point. The Beshear name is so strong in Kentucky, and it's funny, he was almost able to isolate himself from the national environment the Democrats are operating in. It's a complicated story because he's a pro-life Democrat, but he does support protections for the woman in case of rape and incest and health of the mother. So I don't know if that lesson can necessarily be learned nationally by Democrats, but I think what it shows is that a strong Democratic brand, even in this environment, who's trusted with voters in their state, can be successful.
Yeah, look, I think that Ed was right, that this, candidates matter. He's a strong candidate. Frankly, in many states, he'd be a Republican. He's pro-life. He's pro-gun. So I don't think there's anything that national Democrats can learn from him other than maybe to become more conservative. And that's the path to win in a state like Kentucky.
Nora, I've also been talking to folks on the ground in Kentucky, and they just said he outperformed his 19 numbers in so many parts. I know the numbers are still coming in, but they've just been amazed. Even in those flood counties, in kind of some of the more dispersed parts of the state, Beshear's numbers are going to look really strong after tonight.
Thanks to both of you. I mean, we were on the ground in Mayfield, Kentucky, when that town was just wiped out in December 2021. We went to one of the press conferences where I can remember him getting very emotional. And I thought, this guy has an amazing connection with the people of, Kentucky. The way he empathized with people, reached out to many of the victims of that terrible, terrible tornado that really wiped out the parts. And then in terms of policies, we were just reading up on this, he's getting credit for in the press of extricating the Biden from Bidenomics, by essentially campaigning on that major bridge project that you mentioned, the infrastructure law, by talking about the 2 best years for economic development in our history, job growth in the state of Kentucky. And there has been job growth nationally as well, but the president's not getting any credit for it. But here's a Democratic governor who's managed to get some credit for it.
Yeah, and governors often do. It's easier for them to run on a strong economy because the voter feels it more and feels that connection closer. And he may be now one of the last incumbents to win re-election post-pandemic. But we were talking earlier today here on the streaming network with Congressman Morgan McGarvey from the Louisville area, who said voters remember that during that pandemic, 5 o'clock every day he was on the news. He said, I had voters who were calling it beers with Beshear because they knew that every day he'd be there talking about this and talking straight about it.
And reassuring.
That counts for something.
Yeah, and reassuring in that. I want to broaden this conversation to what this perhaps means for the 2024 presidential race. Daniel Cameron losing in Kentucky. We may be witnessing a not good night for Governor Youngkin in Virginia. Chris Christie just tweeting, the losing will only end for Republicans if we rid ourselves of Donald Trump. Trump/loser in 18, 20, 21, 22, and now 23.
Actually, though, Governor Christie might make that argument. But tonight's so much about abortion rights versus former President Donald Trump. And the person I'm going to be paying attention to on that debate stage tomorrow in Miami, it's former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. She has been out there. She's conservative on abortion policy. At the same time, she has said publicly she doesn't want to see women prosecuted. She has a bit of a different tonal approach, a different way of framing some of how she talks about abortion than some conservatives who are a little bit more conservative in their framing of the issue. Can she meet this moment and say the Republican Party isn't winning in all of these places on their position on abortion rights?
But she has, and Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, she has endorsed a 15-week limit or ban, depending on how you want to call it. But you're right. She has said we should not be criminalizing women or doctors in this.
Right. And she's gotten into some arguments with other candidates from her own state, namely Tim Scott, about the best way forward on this issue. She says she wants to have sympathy for the women and this is a difficult issue. And obviously, she herself is a woman and she definitely, talks differently about it than the other candidates that are who are there on the stage. But I think that the question that the Biden team is asking tonight and might ask in that phone call that you suggest they make to Andy Beshear tomorrow is why is it that Bidenomics works so well for someone like Andy Beshear and Biden himself is not seeing the benefits? As you pointed out, Nora, unemployment is down, inflation is down, job growth is up, and yet in our most recent CBS News poll, when voters were asked, do you think you'll do better personally under Biden or Trump? By a very wide margin, they said Trump. And this is an issue that his campaign has spent millions of dollars to try to make the case that he's strong on the economy. He's passed all these infrastructure bills, and yet they still don't see that he is getting any kind of benefit.
I'm curious how you think the results, too, tonight will factor into that debate tomorrow night.
Well, there's certainly going to be a conversation now about abortion, potentially, if Youngkin doesn't get his way in Virginia. And I do wonder if there isn't any more of a conversation about, trying to tie Democrats to the president and it not working in a state that the former president won by more than 20 points. I think one thing the White House would like to do going forward is remind voters that while this wasn't necessarily a Trump-themed contest, he is the guy that led to the Supreme Court being tilted in such a way that all of this was allowed to happen. And they will hang that around Trump's neck and remind voters you'll get more of that going forward.
Yeah, but they're not going to say that in the Republican debate.
They won't say it in the Republican debate.
Yeah.
What they'll talk about in the Republican debate is, how do we continue? And this is a conversation they've had in the last two debates. How do you talk about abortion? How do you restrict it in a way that, and restrict is probably the balanced word now going forward in all this. Does Haley have a point, or do you have to continue to be as conservative as they have been?
Want to bring in some breaking news. This just coming in. CBS News projects that Ohio issue number 1 will pass. That will enshrine abortion rights into the state constitution, making it the 7th state where Americans voted to protect the right to abortion and against new restrictions. Adriana?
I think what that's showing is that Americans are still galvanized by this issue. Dobbs happened more than a year ago, and it's still something that's driving people to the polls. And we want to see, Democrats especially, want to see if that's going to continue to next year. But, as we were just talking about, a lot of Republicans are kind of starting to look at that middle ground. It's not as polarized as it has been in the past. People are changing their messaging, using different words, trying to find a way, a path forward, to see if there could be a little bit more consensus. But another thing that you mentioned, Nancy, about the CBS News poll, where, there was concern about whether or not Biden's economic message was falling on deaf ears. When you break it down and look at minorities, Latinos said in our poll, 45% of them said that they would be worse off financially under another Biden presidency. And you look at Black voters, they said they'll be about the same. And, we all saw the polls this weekend, including ours, that showed that he's really losing with minorities, and he needs them to win. Latinos, they want more messaging on the economy. A lot of people think immigration's their top issue. Univision polls show that immigration's the 6th issue for them. The economy is pretty much the top 5. So, Black voters also are feeling, left out of the conversation. I spoke to an organizer in Wisconsin who said, all the messaging that Biden was giving us, they aren't delivering. So they're really going to try to have to work on that.
Thank you, Adriana. I want to bring in Jerika Duncan because she is on the ground there in Ohio at that watch party. Jerika, tell me, I imagine that particular group that had campaigned so hard to get this approved is elated this evening.
Yeah, so what you see behind me is not reflective of what I'm looking at. I actually stepped off of the stage for a second to go into the crowd, which is filled with people hugging each other, crying. I asked one woman, "Why are you crying?" And she looked at me and she said, "Because I used to be a former legislator, and I told doctors who would call my office, if you really want to end this in terms of the taking away of access to abortion, you've got to make this an amendment." And she said, "And I can't believe we did it. We actually did it." So I imagine that we will be hearing from many of the organizers who are in this room tonight within the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, because it is clear that this group is claiming victory tonight on issue 1, to enshrine a woman's right to an abortion here in Ohio. I did get some reporting from our reporter that's at another rally for the abortion's opponents, rather, and they said that they're going to continue to fight, although they are not saying that this is over just yet. From what we're hearing from our reporter that's there, they're going to focus on the parental issue, and that is the idea that in the language on this ballot, they feel that there are parental rights that should be considered that are not in this issue. But as of right now, really the big story is people are starting to make their way here, I'm sure, to listen to speakers, is that this issue, and I believe CBS News is calling 57 to 42, that it's a yes.
Yes, and Jerika, can you turn the camera? Can you show us the crowd? Can you?
We can. You know what? If we could try to, there's a lot. So stay with us. There's a number of other networks and whatnot. So we're just going to keep going. Scott's going to help me out here.
Yeah, this is interesting.
So if you look right here, hundreds of people.
This is what people want to see behind the scenes. Yes.
I almost want to tell people, excuse me, could you just move a little? No. But
this
there's
is
a
what
number
it looks
of
like.
people who are hugging, who were crying, who were just excited. And if you can, zoom in a little bit and see some of the faces of the people. He said he can't quite zoom in, but I'm going to bring you back over here, actually, so stay with me. This is live television at its finest.
While you're, well, I was going to say, I'll talk to you, Drika.
This is the crowd. This is the crowd that we're looking at. And again, go ahead.
If Republican voters feel that they have been defeated in this particular ballot amendment, they're not going to want to bring up the issue again in a presidential race and when there's a key Senate race there, one that would galvanize additional Democratic voters. They need to find a way to galvanize their own voters.
But if you're the DNC, you're trying to figure out how can we get this issue on ballots in as many states in the country as possible in 2024.
You think to yourself, okay, New York's going to do this, big whoop.
Yeah.
Well, that helps because how many House races could help tip the balance of power in the House that are going to be decided there right around New York City? If you drive out more Democratic voters or people inclined to support abortion rights, you could potentially tip the scales of the House back to Democrats.
All right, we'll continue this conversation after the break. We've got more results, and we'll talk about the biggest issues on voters' minds. That's next.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
You want me to just
What's wrong with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
Why? Why?
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
Welcome back to our election night coverage. One of the big stories of the night centers around the topic of abortion rights, with the voters in the Buckeye State enshrining reproductive rights in their state's Constitution. This has garnered a lot of attention from national groups. Tens of millions of dollars spent on this ballot measure. Let's bring in CBS's Jerika Duncan, who is there. Jerika?
That's right. I want to step out of the way so you can listen to Lauren Blavel. She is someone that we spoke to as soon as we touched the ground here. She's 35 years old. She's the co-chair of Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights. Let's listen in.
To our volunteers, our staff, our storytellers, our partners and donors, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Every email, every door knock, every phone bank, letter writing party, and donation mattered. Thank you for your time and your passion and for being part of this movement. Throughout this campaign, our diverse coalition was our strength.
I'm going to just come back in here a little bit, but one of the first words, the first sentence that she echoed, the first thing that she echoed when she came onto the stage is abortion is health care. Abortion is the law of the land here in Ohio. This is someone, many people in this room, in fact, have been fighting on this issue for several years, but they said they really focused on this within the last year because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And as Nancy had pointed out earlier this evening, the governor here signed a 6-week limit or ban into effect in 2019. That effectively became law when Roe v. Wade was overturned. As a result, a number of people that I've spoken to who are abortion rights supporters said that they were concerned that that 6-week ban, which is on hold right now in the courts, would eventually become law and govern the rights of women when it comes to abortion if this amendment was not passed. So again, you just heard from Lauren Blavel. She's the co-chair of the Ohioans United for Reproductive Rights. But a big win and another win, adding to the 7th time that we've seen when this is on the ballot, abortion supporters of abortion rights have prevailed. Nora?
Jerika Duncan, thank you for your reporting in Columbus, Ohio. Let's bring in Anthony Salvanto because there are exit polls out now about Ohio and this measure. Anthony.
Hey there, Nora. Here's your story in terms of the groups. Liberals overwhelmingly voted yes, maybe no surprise. Voters under 30, young people, big part of this coalition, 8 and 10 voting yes. But then single women and college graduates in the exit poll, all voting yes in big numbers. That's really important, not just because it's the groups that were expected to vote yes, also turning out high, but also because these are big parts of the Democratic coalition. If we look ahead to 2024, like we've been talking about tonight, are these groups that are going to be motivated by the abortion issue, maybe on a national stage? This is going to give Democrats and abortion rights activists a lot of optimism going forward, Nora.
Anthony, thank you. One thing giving Democrats some optimism is that win in the Kentucky governor's race. We've just learned President Biden spoke with Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear this evening to congratulate him. You two cover the White House, and let me ask you, Nancy, so how do you think that the White House, the president's political team, is looking at tonight?
Well, clearly the president took Ed's advice and called Governor Beshear. He didn't even wait till tomorrow, as Ed suggested. He got on the phone right away. He must be watching CBS News. But in all honesty, they're going to be looking at the ways that Beshear talked about economic gains in his state. They're going to look at the ways that he talked about infrastructure. I've already been getting reminders from the Biden campaign. Hey, President Biden was down there, too, standing side by side with Beshear when he was there at the Brent Spence Bridge. So they want to remind folks that they've been in on this from the beginning.
All right. When we come back, Robert Costa with some information about what's happening in the state of Pennsylvania. We'll be right back.
Our story's just begun.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high?
Where are these coming from?
That's the million-dollar question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking what's happening in the world, why is this happening, and how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Well, election night headquarters here at CBS, and it appears to be a good night for Democrats. Robert Costa, what's happened in Pennsylvania?
We are also following the state Supreme Court race in Pennsylvania. 37% of the vote is in, according to the Associated Press. And so far, Daniel McCaffrey, the incumbent Democrat, is ahead.
All right. This programming note, tomorrow Major Garrett will be anchoring a special edition of America Decides before the Miami Republican debate here on CBS News Streaming. That's beginning at 5 p.m. Eastern. Major will be live again at 10 p.m. Eastern with the post-debate special with reporting and interviews from Robert Costa and Ed Keefe in Miami. Oh, you're going to Miami? All right. Well, we'll continue to bring you updates throughout the night here on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and then tomorrow on CBS Mornings. And, of course, we'll have a full wrap-up on the CBS Evening News. For Robert Costa, Nancy Cordes, Ed O'Keefe, Adriana Diaz, and our entire political team, I'm Norah O'Donnell. Good night.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
Everybody wakes up in the morning and they are pelted with alerts that frighten them, news that agitates them. With this show, we have the time to explain what's going on. These migrants, they've been released. Explain the status that allows them to be released, to slow things down a little bit. What are the big sets of questions for China and its ambitions? Hackers are stepping up their attacks to extort victims. Let's start with easy. Who's